Hello, my name is Savannah Ducharme, and today I will be walking you through the creation process of my vocabulary learning app, Dr. Vocab, in Career Foundry's UX Fundamentals course. The first step in the process was conducting a competitive analysis of other vocabulary learning apps on the market, and in reviewing these very different apps, I learned that balance between choice and too much choice is really important for the user because too much customization can be overwhelming and lead to decision fatigue, and then not having enough customization can be frustrating. Also, gamification of learning is really enjoyable and encouraging. And lastly, a simple, clean interface with minimum distractions made for a much more enjoyable experience. And so, keeping advertising to a minimum and also not having constant pop-ups about upgrades. So the next step was conducting user interviews, and I did in-person and over the phone interviews with 4 people, all within the age range of 25 to 35, to gain insight into the behaviors, thoughts, and feelings of potential users of educational or vocabulary learning aids. And in conducting these interviews with 4 people from a similar demographic, but all with different behaviors and perspectives, my main takeaways were that context is helpful for learning things. So not just learning, not just flipping through vocabulary words and seeing the word and the definition, but also seeing it in a sentence or trying to use it in a sentence. Another interesting thing that came up was the learning of roots to expand your vocabulary and to help better remember words and also make learning new words easier. And 3 out of my 4 interviewees were in school, and so it's kind of a niche thing to learn, but it was an interesting thing that later informed my persona. Having friends or a community to learn with was motivating for all of these users. And then lastly, having a personal interest and then wanting to better themselves were all key motivators. And this is a unique perspective, but it definitely informed my persona. So using these user interviews and what insight I gained from them, I was able to come up with Elizabeth Collins, who is a 28-year-old female that is in medical school at UCLA. And she, with such a busy schedule but a drive to better her medical knowledge, Elizabeth needs a way to study and record the new vocabulary and medical jargon she is learning and hearing every day, a way that allows her to study in short bursts and keep track of her progress while being interesting and simple. So her quote, "I am constantly on the go and learning new things every day. I want a place to document when I'm learning easily and so I can come back to it later." So her main needs and goals were to expand and better her medical vocabulary, and as a way to do this, learning root words so that she can remember what she's learning better and then understand new medical jargon that she's hearing, and then a way to kind of store what she's learning and come back to it and review it in easy and short bursts. So using Elizabeth as a persona, I came up with the following problem statement. Elizabeth, a busy student, needs a way to learn, study, and record medical vocabulary in an easy and non-time-consuming way because she wants to master and better understand medical terminology for school and in her career in medicine. And then as a hypothesis statement, we believe that by creating an intuitive and easy-to-use app that presents words in context and provides definitions of root words along with the ability to customize and add words, hear pronunciations, and connect with friends and other users, for Elizabeth, we will enable her to achieve better retention and understanding of medical terms to use during her studies and later on during her career in the medical field. So the next step in the process, now that I had my problem statement, was identifying the most important task for Elizabeth to be able to complete. And from that, creating the user flow to better understand what moves she would make in an app to get from point A to point B. And so that first task was, adding a new flashcard. And the second task was being able to quiz herself on words. And so using these user flows, I was able to start creating the wireframes. And so in round 1, I kind of did a Crazy 8 style and just put whatever I was thinking on the page. And then in round 2, I went back, took the frames I liked the most from the first round, and recreated them in a cleaner way, in a cleaner style. And that, with the revised wireframes, I was able to create the first prototype. And I did that using just screenshots of the hand-drawn wireframes. So using the low-fidelity prototype created in the last step, I tested the design with 5 participants, all within 10-minute sessions, and giving them 5 scenario tasks. So the first 2 tasks, creating a new account and logging in and logging out, were a way to warm them up to the app and introduce them, to what it looked like in the interface. And also, I figured those were important steps for any user to take. The next one was adding a new card to an existing deck, completing a quiz, and then searching for a new deck and adding it to your library. So, based on my observations during the usability test, I rated each user's actions or inactions using Jacob Nielsen's error severity rating scale as a better way to prioritize what needed to be changed in this next round. So one of the biggest issues that I saw was the onboarding screen. So after creating an account, users were very confused with the onboarding screens. They didn't understand what was going on, how to get out of it, how to go back, and what they were being told. The next big thing that I saw were that users were unaware of where they were on the navigation bar because there was no indication where they were existing in the space. And so that seemed like a crucial thing that would need to be changed going forward. Next thing that I noticed during the third task is that when asked to add a new word, users could get to that part easily, but once they were on the card creation page, they didn't realize that they could flip the card over and add a definition and link root words. So instead, they just stayed on the one page and hit save. And this, given that this is a flashcard creation app in a way, not knowing that they could add more information would be a big problem. And so that was something that would need to be changed going forward. And then lastly, when completing a quiz, at the end of it, no one had an issue completing the quiz, but after, everyone wanted to review their answers to see what they got wrong. So not a huge problem, but definitely a function that users were looking for. So in the next round of wireframes, I attempted to correct these elements, these pain points in the design. So for the onboarding screens, I added arrows so users knew that they could continue forward or go back, and also just kind of cleaned them up and added a little more information so that they understood that they were being told what they could do within the app and kind of getting an introduction to the app. I also updated the navigation bar to change colors when on a certain tab. So when users were on the home page, the little house on the bottom of the navigation bar, the background turns gray. Or when they're on the settings page, it's gray behind the little person so that they knew where they were. When adding a new card, I added a clear arrow to flip the card. And I also put the save button on the backside of the card so that to continue with the process, they would have to flip the card over and see that they could add more information. And then I also gave them a way to go back if they wanted to change something on the first part. And then lastly, I added a review answer function to enable users to see their mistakes during a quiz, just because that seemed like a more intuitive thing for users to do. And with these changes and an overall more clean design, it created a revised prototype in Adobe XD, and it can be found in its entirety using this link. So, going forward, there's still much to be done to fully develop this app. It's still in its early phases. And thinking back to Elizabeth, my original persona, there are key functions that she wanted in a vocabulary app, such as pronunciation and a community function where she can connect with other users and friends. And so developing those functions out further would be a good way to expand the app. And then a big concern of mine that came up in my competitive analysis was striking a balance between too much choice and not enough choice for the user. And I think I did a pretty good job of that. There's still room to add a bit more customization options and abilities. Because it's such an early phase in the development, there's still a lot of functions that aren't there, but that could be there. That would, help empower users to better customize their experience and achieve what they want to ultimately. And then lastly, is there enough of a gamification element? And I think this is lacking the most in the current prototype of all the things that I wanted to try to achieve. So going forward, I'd like to see more engaging quizzing options with tracking abilities over time and ways to challenge other users and just a little bit more fun. So what I learned, overall going through this process taught me a lot about what goes into designing an app, and even just to a limited prototype, and it's a lot of work, but it was a lot of fun. So some of my favorite part would be conducting user interviews, and creating a key persona really helped me in the design process to keep me on track, and especially because it can be overwhelming to know where to begin and what to include in the design, and all the other decisions that I had to make. Having real users to think about and a detailed persona really helped me to make better informed design decisions. And something else I learned and enjoyed a lot was interacting with users. It was fascinating to see how differently people think and behave from the user interviews, and seeing people's perspectives on education and vocabulary, and then when conducting the usability test and seeing how differently people behaved and what kind of what things they wanted to do and how they got from point A to point B. And lastly, my biggest takeaway was that trying to make things perfect isn't the point of the process. That flaws are to be expected, and it is more productive to create an incomplete project that can be iterated and learn from the process and your users, rather than trying to create some perfect project right from the go and then presenting it to your users and having them be like, what? So just the collaboration between you and the users was a big takeaway and something that I enjoyed. So thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it.